not to take anything for granted is a tremendous yisoid in Yiddishkeit. And sometimes the danger of overconfidence in success can be much more damaging than the frustration of failure. Right after Mordechai Tzadik's triumphant march with Haman pulling the horse and everyone screaming, the pasuk goes right on to say that Mordechai returned to his sackcloth. And he continued to cry and to fast. Haman already saw the handwriting on the wall. Mordechai knew that a tremendous naze had just occurred, this whole story of Haman having to wash him and dress him and put him on the horse. Achashverosh's mood was clearly turning against Haman. Why should Mordechai, and the pasuk emphasizes this, right after the march on the horse, right after Haman's daughter falling and everything else happening, why does Mordechai return to his sackcloth? And the answer is Mordechai sensed a tremendous danger here. And the Sfar Megdashim bring this. This is one of the methods, one of the dangerous methods that the Satan uses. Klal Yisrael cries, Klal Yisrael is mispalel, and the Satan sees that their tefillos are breaking through. So what does he do? He promotes a mitzvah Yeshua. He shows how salvation is around the corner. He makes the matzvah easier. And this is by design. Because when Klal Yisrael sees that things are starting to go their way, they let the guard down. And they're not mispalel sincerely as beforehand. They don't feel the need as much. And then the Satan takes advantage of their being lax, and the real Gzeira, Rachmana litzlan, sets down upon Seineim Shel Yisrael. When the Tsar came out with his decree, an infamous decree which plagued Klal Yisrael for many years, the Kantaristin, where Jewish children were grabbed from their mother's hand and sent off to some remote part of Russia, and eventually wind up in the Tsar's army for 25 years. When the Gzeira was first suggested, when the decree was put onto the table, Yidden all over Russia flocked to the Batei Midrashim. There wasn't a dry eye throughout the entire Jewish Russian population. And then, it seemed like the Gzeira would become batal. Those with access to high windows, all those that were Karev L'Malchus, let it be known that it looks like the Tsar has been influenced. The bribes had reached their point. It looked like the scale was tipping in their favor. This decree will become batal. It was for all practical purposes null and void. And there was much rejoicing amongst the Jews. And at the end, the decree was far from null and void. It opened up one of Klal Yisrael's most difficult parshiyos of grief and despair. And it lasted for many, many years. Tzaddikim said that they pleaded with the people. There was a strong feeling that when the rumors started emanating out of St. Petersburg, that the decree had been quenched, this was a Maisa HaSatan. There were tzaddikim that pleaded with their people, don't stop davening. The Satan sees your tefillos are breaking through. This is one of his methods. But there was a sense of, shoo, it's all over. Don't worry. It looks like it's not going to happen. Klal Yisrael let their guard down. The Tehillims were closed. People were back to their business. And then suddenly the Gzeira was there, etched in stone. The pasuk tells us that that Leah became pregnant again, that Taylor Ben, and she had a son, that Timer, and she says, Hapam, this time, Oides Hashem, I will praise Hashem. And now came therefore Karish Shema Yehuda, she called him Yehuda. And right afterwards the pasuk says that Tamid Miladis, and she stopped having children. Although that would only be an interim suspension, Yisachar and Zvulun were still on the way. But for the time being, the joy that came along with her children would be suspended. And somehow it's all in the same pasuk, as if there's a message over here for us to make the connection. And it's an extremely difficult connection to make. Oides Hashem, she praises Hashem, Al Ken Karish Shema Yehuda, and as a result it seems that the Tamid Miladis, that she stops having children. Praising Hashem should be the source of the beginning of all brachas and all blessings. What did she do wrong over here that triggered, albeit temporarily, a stop to her joy? The Mechaz Elazar brings from the Chayza that while she thanked Hashem for Yehuda, and as Rashi tells us, that means she thanked Hashem for having received more than her share, She knew there would be 12 shvatim. She knew there would be 4 wives. That should mean 3 for each, and now she had her 4th son. In all due respect to her, and because she was such a great tzedekis, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu is medagdik, tzedikim kechut asara, like a hairbreadth, she is faulted over here for having expressed the sentiment that she had already achieved the zenith of her goal. That now she had absolutely nothing else to worry about. Now you have to bear in mind here, she thanks Hashem for this. And the Torah L'Shvach Leah expresses how she expressed her gratitude for us to learn. But by the same token, there's a mashahu of a taina against her, and now you have nothing to worry about anymore. A yid has to always feel, yes, I've reached the Yeshua, things have gotten easier, thank you so much Hashem, but the Rebbeinu Shalom, I beg of you to continue helping me. The Eibush is right to help me. And the tiny little speck of criticism that the Torah has against Leah is we're not saying the Rebbeinu Shalom, and please continue to help me. So when someone asks you how you're feeling, the Nichas Allah says the proper response is not just Baruch Hashem, and the Eibush is right to help, and I hope Hashem continues to help. Never let your guard down. That doesn't mean panic and be depressed. It just means be confident, but no, you have to come on to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Now, having explained this, let us still not underestimate the greatness of Leah's statement over here. With the birth of Yehuda, Leah says, "Apam oide es Hashem." I will now praise Hashem. What was she really thanking Hashem for? The Bnei Yissaschar explains that with the birth of Yehuda, Leah saw David HaMelech, Leah saw Sefer Tehillim, which is our ultimate vehicle of praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is Tehillim that we use to cry, it is Tehillim that we use to pray with, it is Tehillim that we use to thank Hashem with. And therefore she said, Apam oides Hashem, thanking Hashem that with the birth of Yehuda came the source of Haidah, the source of praise, by which Klal Yisrael can associate themselves with their Creator. Now let's focus a little bit on Rachel's reaction. The pasuk continues, when Rachel saw that she did not bear children for Yaakov, Rachel envied her sister. The time of Yaakov, and she said to Yaakov, Havali banim, give me children, and if not, she says she's willing to die. What about the prohibition of being jealous against someone? So Rashi explains to us that she envied her good deeds. She reasoned, Leah must be so much more righteous than I am. She must be such a greater tzedekis than I am. If not, she would not have merited sons. So her jealousy was for the fact that she perceived Leah to be in a much higher madrega than she was. But there's a lot that has to be understood. Because she didn't have any children and Leah did, that meant that she wasn't a worthy person. After all, what about Rivka? What about Sarah? They didn't have children for so many years. So on what basis does she draw this conclusion that Leah must be so much better than her because Leah had children and she was yet to have children? The Ber Moshe of Miyozhev Rebbe explains that let's put things into perspective. You have to understand that the imais, our mothers, whatever their concerns were, whatever their frustrations were, it had to do with Klal Yisrael. It wasn't personal. The imais wanted children that were going to be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim. When Yehuda was born, and it was clear from the onset, especially to the imais who were Bali Ruach HaKodesh, that Yehuda would personify the inyan of Kiddush Shem Shemayim B'Rabim. It would be Nachshon ben Aminadab and Shevet Yehuda that would be the first to jump into the Yam. And there was nothing that Leah could have possibly been more happier about than this schus. And that's why it says the Talmud Miledis afterwards, according to the Ber Moshe, because she felt, what else do you need? If I gave birth to the symbol of Kiddush Shem Shemayim B'Rabim, to the symbol of Mesiras Nefesh. And this ignited the flames of Rachel's jealousy. She also wanted a son that was going to be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim B'Rabim. She wanted that same degree of Mesiras Nefesh, of Kiddush Hashem, to be injected into the very essence of the world. And therefore she said to Yaakov, Havali banim, give me children. I also want to have children that are going to be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim. Im Ayin is not Mesa Naichi. What does Mesa Naichi mean? Literally, it sounds like she's saying that she doesn't want to live anymore. She'd rather die. That's not what she said. The Ber Moshe explains what she really said was, Im Ayin, if I won't be Zocher to children who will be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim B'Rabim, who will show their Mesiras Nefesh to the world, and their devotion to Hashem Yisbarach, Neisa Noichi. Then let me die. Let me have the opportunity of dying al Kiddush Hashem, of showing my Mesiras Nefesh. But I want Kiddush Shem Shemayim to stem forth from my essence. And if it can't be through children, then let it be through myself. That's what she meant to say. The Inayim Mesa Anoichi. Anoichi stands for the Anoichi of the Aseret HaDibros. Then I want the opportunity to give up my life for a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And he quotes the Zohar Kodesh to this effect. And that is why the Ber Moshe explains later, amongst many other midrashim that he explains on this topic, when Yosef would be born, Rachel's response was, Asaf Elokim es Cherpasi. Hashem has taken away my shame. Lack of Kiddush Hashem is expressed with the term Cherpa. We see that in the Rambam, in the Sefer HaMitzvot and Mitzvot, where the Rambam talks about the mitzvah of Kiddush Shemayim, how Yid has to always be ready to offer the ultimate sacrifice for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be mefasim the emunah of Hashem, regardless of the danger that may be involved. Like Sinanya Meshol Yazar did during the times of Nebuchadnezzar, and unfortunately not like the masses of Klal Yisrael who didn't have the courage. They were frightened. The Haisa Bezeh quotes as the Rambam, Cherpo L'chol Yisrael, ala she'av de Zaysa Mitzvah Micholim, that they lost this mitzvah of Kiddush Shem Shemayim. So the Rambam describes the lack of Kiddush Shem Shemayim as Cherpa, and the Mela Rachel, who only wanted to emulate her sister in terms of being the Kiddush Shem Shemayim, with the birth of Yosef, said, Asaf Elokim es Cherpasi, Hashem has taken away my Cherpa, for Yosef too will be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim. Albeit, there was a major difference between the Kiddush Shem Shemayim of Yehuda as opposed to Yosef. The Gemara in the Masechta Sotah draws that distinction. Yehuda was Mekadosh Shem Shemayim Berabim, by jumping into the Yamsuf. Yosef was Mekadosh Shem Shemayim Beseser, by withstanding the Nisayan of Eishes Potiphar. And although Rachel was overjoyed with the birth of Yosef, she was not quite 100% content, because she also wanted the Madrega of Kiddush Shem Shemayim Berabim. And therefore, right away she was Mispalel, Yosef Hashem li ben Acher. Hashem, give me another son, that in addition to Yosef's Shem Shemayim B'tzina, my other son should be Zoicha to be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim B'Faresia. And indeed, her tefillas were answered. Binyamin too was Mekadosh Shem Shemayim B'Rabim. Again, quoting from the Gemara in Masechta Sotah, that's Lamed Zayin. The Gemara says that during the time of Kriyas Yamsuf, the Shevet of Binyamin started jumping into the Yam first. And Yehuda, realizing what Binyamin was doing, jumped ahead. And Nachshon ben Aminadav sort of was able to make his way forward. The Gemara tells us the whole story over there. But Binyamin was along with Yehuda in their Mesiras Nefesh of jumping into the Yam Suf, and that's why Binyamin was Zoicha to the Frah that the Beis HaMikdash should dwell in his chelik, in his portion of Eretz Yisrael, and it actually was a combination. The Beis HaMikdash stood on a combined portion of both Binyamin and Yehuda. And it's a quite fascinating thing, explains the Ber Moshe, that if you look throughout Tanakh, Yehuda and Binyamin are always together. When the Aseret HaShvatim separated themselves from the other two Shvatim during the days of Rechav and Ben Shloima, who were the two Shvatim that remained loyal to the house of David? Yehuda and Binyamin. The Aseret HaShvatim went into Golus wherever they are in Golus, within of the Nahas and Batyarin, and Yehuda and Binyamin, they take on the Golus of the world. They are scattered amongst the nations. Again, the objective of Klal Yisrael and Golus is to be Mekadosh Shem Shemayim, to hold on to our emunah even under the most trying of circumstances. But who's in this together? Most of us are from either Shevet Yehuda or Binyamin. Quoting the Medrash, the Ber Moshe says, Amar Pinchas, Mitzilos Shel Rachel, was Rachel's prayer that were able to accomplish this, that Yehuda and Binyamin were never separated. The Aseret HaShvatim would break away, but they stood together. Where do we find that Rachel was mispal for this? So the Ber Moshe explains that was her tefillah of Yosef Hashem li ben Acher. After Yosef was born, she prayed, but give me another son. I'm so happy that I was left to Yosef, who was Mekadosh Shem Shemayim in his way, but give me another son that's going to be along the lines of Yehuda, that'll take on the task of being Mekadosh Shem Shemayim B'Rabim. And perhaps it is good to point out over here that the first two kings of Klal Yisrael were Shaul HaMelech, who came from Binyamin, and David HaMelech, who came from Yehuda. The Mitzvah of Eliyahu from Rav Dessler brings the Shem Hazayah, that there is a plin of Mashiach that has to come from Yehuda and a plin of Mashiach that has to come from Rachel. which we allude to as Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef. He explains that had Klal Yisrael been Zaycha, somehow the Malchus of Shaul, which is Rachel's Kiddush Shem Shemayim B'Ravim, and the Malchus of David, which was Leah's Kiddush Shem Shemayim B'Ravim, could have worked out in harmony. It was only because Klal Yisrael wasn't Zaycha that there would have to be a struggle between the two. Now, getting back to what we started with, Leah's expression of praise, upon Oides Hashem when Yehuda was born. The Gemara says in Masechtas Brachos of Zion, Miyom Shebara Kadosh Baruch Hu B'Sa'olam, from the day that Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world, Lo Haya Adam Shehoida LaKadosh Baruch Hu Asher Ba Leah. There was no one who really praised or thanked Hashem until Leah came. Well, that's a difficult thing to understand. Yovei from Masakim, the Tzilos, the word Tzadikim, even before Leah, none of them ever praised Hashem. The Sefer Tiv Gittin explains that indeed there were many who thanked Hashem. But Leah initiated a different kind of praise, called Haidah. Now what does the word Haidah literally mean? Haidah means to acknowledge, to admit. Moida b'knas potter. I'm Moida. I was wrong, you're right. So this has to be understood. We use the term Haidah as a form of expressing praise to Hashem, Apam Oides Hashem. And on the other hand, the term Haidah means to admit. That means I did something wrong, and I'm admitting you were right and I was wrong. How are these two definitions of the term Haidah reconciled? The Tiv Gittin says a beautiful verse. Leah is in a situation where she is snua. She is hated. Whatever that means, hated, we have to understand. We're talking about Yaakov Avinu over here, and obviously this cannot be accepted at face value. But in some sense of the word, Leah felt she was in a disposition. She felt not wanted. She felt snuya, whatever that means. Ultimately, because she was snuya, and Lekim Yivakish and Hashem wanted to compensate her for that, so she was zeicha to children, to many children, to roiv of the Shvatim to build Klal Yisrael with. And we have to bear in mind that Leah was an akara. Leah naturally could not have children. It was a nest that she had children. And suddenly Leah realized something. Had I not been in this position of being Sinuya, then Hashem would have not had a need to compensate me. I would not fall under the category of Elokim Yivakish Esanirdav. And I would have not had children. Ultimately, it would have been in a far worse matziv indefinitely than I am now. Because I was Sinuya, therefore Hashem would compensate my perceived lack of love with the birth of children. So the term of Haidah was in the context of Hashem. What I thought was the worst thing in the world for me until now turns out to be the greatest of brachas. Whatever you do, Rabbeinu Shalom, to us, which we perceive as something difficult for us, is really the greatest of brachas. It just takes time until we have to see it and understand it. I admit now, what I thought was terrible was really great. What I thought was the worst situation in the world was the catalyst to bring about the best situation in the world. And this became her attitude now in life in general. And that is what the Gemara says, there was no one who praised Hashem, who said thank you this way to Hashem until Leah came. And if you think about it, this insight, this way of looking at things, is a perspective that can turn a person's life around. In dealing with the Shalom Bayis issue, so one spouse once complained that the other spouse was so demanding, and financially, he couldn't keep up with it. What's going to be? I keep giving in, I can't afford this. And then this verse was shown to him. And the argument was suggested, well, maybe because you're in such a situation where for your Shalom Bayis you're trying to work so hard to make your wife happy, that's precisely the reason Hashem has given you Parnasa. Because while you may have not been Zeicha to Parnasa, but Hashem is willing to help you in your endeavor for Shalom Bayis, and because your Shalom Bayis is in a situation that it requires Parnasa, so automatically you get Parnasa through the Shalom Bayis channel. And this is just a wonderful way of looking at things. There's the famous cliche of the poor Yid who sat down on a wicker-type chair and fell through. And when everyone stood around laughing, he answered, don't laugh at me, I'm a big tzaddik. I'm like Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu lay down on the stones, on the 12 different stones, and they all started arguing. Each stone tainted that the head of the tzaddik should lay on him. So what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? HaKadosh Baruch Hu took all 12 stones and turned them into one stone. So you see, when I sat down on this chair that's full of little holes, this little net-like, web-like chair, all the holes started arguing. Who is going to be Zaycha that the tzaddik sits on it? So in order to make shalom, Hashem turned all the holes into a big hole. That's why it fell through. The truth is, the Mishnah tells us in Masechtas and Hedron, Kinus l'tzadikim, when tzadikim get together, it is toiv lihem, the toiv la'olam. It's good for them and good for the world. When the Rishayim get together, it's bad for them because it gives them a greater power and more of an opportunity to plan their evil plots, and as a result, it's bad for the world. Tizru l'tzadikim. When the tzadikim aren't talking to each other and they are scattered, that's bad for them and bad for the world. Tizru l'Rishayim, when the Rishayim are fighting amongst each other, it's good for them because it gives them less of an opportunity to do evil, and it's good for the world. Unfortunately, the two seem interlocked. When there isn't enough achdus amongst Klal Yisrael, then the achdus comes to the Rishayim, and then we all suffer. So the stones are all arguing with each other, and each one says, Allah yiniach tzadik es roisha. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu's solution was, v'kulam nivlu be'echa, that they all were absorbed into one entity and they became one stone. Because you have a bunch of stones that are all looking to serve the tzaddik and join together, so there's also to become one stone. L'maisa, take note, explains the Sefer Ber Moshe from the Yuzha Rebbe Zochaim Lavach. Once they became one stone, the argument ceased, even though, in theory, the stone could have still argued, the one stone. Which part of me gets the head of the tzaddik? In other words, let's say I was the stone by the feet of the tzaddik, and I was a separate stone. So I would be terribly upset. How come I'm by the feet, I'm not by the head? And I argue. I say, Allah yiniach tzaddik es roisha. Now suddenly we all become one stone. I'm still by the feet, not by the head. But because I am part of all the other stones, and I'm not a separate entity, suddenly it doesn't bother me anymore. And this is the yesod that the Maral discusses in the Derech HaChaim. He writes, as the Ber Moshe quotes it, Ein ha'adam ha'prati bovad ba'olam. In reality, there is no such a thing as a specific person. A person can live his life isolated. However, he's not really an adam then. Avol yesh la'adam mitzias. The true mitzias to a person is mitzad ha'klal. B'mashehu toich ha'klal. U'mitztaref el ha'klal. An ability to be part of the people, to be within the people, to consider himself connected to the people. Of course, everyone has their own talents. Everyone has their own separate nisyonos. The Maral goes on to explain, we're not diminishing the reality of prat. What we're saying is the prat is so much more enhanced when a person views his situation in terms of how can I then relate to the klal, given who I am and what my challenges are. If I take my personal experiences and I relate to the klal in terms of helping others perhaps with the same difficulties, in terms of applying myself to other people, as a result, I become part of the tzibur. We're one stone. If I don't, I remain a separate entity. Separate entities have problems. Separate entities worry why the head is on someone else's stone. The tzibur doesn't have that problem. Tzibur is not just separate people forming some type of a union together. Tzibur means separate people forming a completely different entity called a tzibur. Thus Chazal say, Kol beyasara shchinta shai. If you have 10 yidden together, you can say Kaddish. If you have 10 yidden together, you can say Kiddusha. You can lane. Mentioned several times the story that I once heard from Rabbi Wein, Rosain Gesund. Came to visit Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zechayim Levrach, Libadl Mechaim L'chaim. And the great Poisik Hadar was in his base medrash in Shari Chesed on a winter afternoon, and it was getting late for Mincha. And some of the greatest Rabbanim of Yerushalayim had come to him to discuss an urgent topic. But sum total of all the Jews in that particular room, as the Shkia was approaching, was 9. So here you have the Gadol Hadar, the Poisik Hadar at that time. Some of the greatest Rabbanim of Yerushalayim, but you cannot say Yiskadol Yiskadol Shmei Rabbi yet. And then suddenly the street cleaner, the Yid dressed in his green overalls, sweeping the streets, walked into the Beis HaMedrash, broom in one hand, shovel in the other hand. The Shlomo Zalman sees him, his eyes lit up, and he says, now we can say Kaddish. The Ber Moshe draws the following analogy. Look at a house, look at a building. When you look at it as a house, it's just that, a house. I don't say, oh my, here's a nice collection of bricks, mortar, cement, pipes, tiles. I say it's a house. It's very possible a month earlier when all these supplies were coming on the truck, I would have looked at piles and piles of various different building supplies laying on the floor, and I would say, look at those bricks, look at those tiles, look at those pipes. But now, I look at it and I say, look at this house. A house is not just bricks and cement placed together. A house is a new entity. It gives a completely different meaning to this particular connection of bricks, cements, beams, and pipes. In the Sefer Yetzirah it says that the letters of Torah, the letters of Tefillah, letters in general, are called avonim. They're called stones. Why? Because just like when you put stones together, they're no longer stones, they become a house. Letters as well. When you put them together, they're not letters. It's not just a set of letters. It's something else altogether. It's a word, it's a sentence, it's a letter, it's a book, it's a sefer. And even though Klal Yisrael is referred to as Oisiyos, every Yid is an Ois in the Sefer Torah. The 600,000 approximate Oisiyos in the Sefer Torah correspond to the Shoyish Neshamayos, to the original 600,000 who were Makabel the Torah, and each and every one of us are embedded into one of those Oisiyos. But we have to bear in mind, a Sefer Torah that is missing one letter is a scroll with many letters on it. And once you are mashlim that last letter, it is now a Sefer Torah. It's something else altogether. It's now a house. Thus we can understand. The Gemara tells us that Avraham Avinu, referring to the sphere of his influence on this world, referred to it as a mountain. Yitzchak referred to it as a field. And Yaakov referred to it as a house. Rav Shimon Levamshin of the Chayil Levracha explained, Avram was the first to publicize that there's a Rabbeinu Shalom on this world. And people began to think about it. But the idea, the concept of a likus seemed to people like a high mountain. It was something to think about, something one day maybe to attain. Afterwards came Yitzchak. Yitzchak brought a likus to this world in the form of a field. Everyone needs a field. Everyone needs the parnasa from the field. Everyone needs the food from the field. In Yitzchak's time, building on what his father Avram did, people began to understand that without a Kadosh Baruch Hu, you cannot survive. But Yaakov went a step further. Yaakov created a house. A field that you work on is very important, especially during the seasons you're supposed to work on it. But it's not like your house. The house is where you always live, whether it's summer, whether it's winter. The only real peace and tranquility one feels is when he has a home, when he can live in his house in peace. Yaakov brought back to Klal Yisrael. The yesod of our very existence is our home, our emunah in the Rabbeinu Shalom. But the way the Ber Moshe explains it, we take this even a step further. Yaakov, who again, building on what Avram and Yitzchak brought to the world, leaves the 12 Shvatim, and the 12 Shvatim are different. There were 12 Shiarim in the Beis HaMikdash. Each one entered through a different doorway. There were originally 12 different Nischais HaTfilah for each Shevet, because each Shevet has a different Shar in Shemayim. But Yaakov let it be known that if we are to have a home, if Klal Yisrael is to have a place to rest, then we have to build a house. A house has different rooms. There's a dining room, there's a kitchen, there's a playroom, there's a bedroom, there's a study. But when it's surrounded by 4 walls, it's one entity, it's one house. If we don't put the walls together, if we remain independent, untrusting of each other, unrespectful of each other's minhagim, if we look with disdain at the way he or his shul dresses, then we don't have a house. Then we have a bunch of separate rooms floating in all different directions. Or worse, stones and pipes. Yaakov Avinu said, "Hey, no, the day is still big. It's not time yet to bring the cattle in. Give the sheep to drink and go back. Go back to the grazing field." The Zohar HaKadosh says that this was a tefillah on part of Yaakov for Klal Yisrael. Yaakov Avinu said as follows: "If hein oid hayoim gada," meaning that we're not ready yet for Mashiach. If loy eisa osef hamikna, if baviniseinu harabim, the time has not yet come to gather in the sheep. Ki yedua, that the sheep of Yaakov Avinu were the neshames of Klal Yisrael. The Yisbach Moshe said he remembers being part of the sheep of Yaakov Avinu. He even remembers the nigun, the song that Yaakov Avinu used to hum to the sheep. If it is not yet time to gather in the sheep, if we aren't zeicha yet to all come to Eretz Yisrael, at least the Rebbeinu Shalom in the interim, hashku hatzayin ulechuru, give the tzayin to drink, give them the fields to graze on. At least the Rebbeinu Shalom, give Klal Yisrael parnasa, help them survive, then at least provide for them in Galus. In conjunction with this, a couple of words about Yaakov Avinu's ladder. The Baal HaTurim gives us a whole host of gematrias that the word sulam, samach vav lamed mem, is equal to. Sulam is the gematria zeh kisi hakavod. Sulam is the gematria koil, because it is the koil of the tefillas hatzadikim, which acts as a conduit or a ladder for the malachim to go up. Sulam is gematria samach mem lamed, which means a statue. Yaakov had a vision of how Nebuch, many of Klal Yisrael, will be ripped away to Avodah Zarah. Sulam is gematria Kate. Kadosh Baruch Hu showed Yaakov Avinu the end of Golus. Sulam is gematria Sinai. Kadosh Baruch Hu showed Yaakov Avinu Maimin HaSinai in the dream. Sulam Mutzav, the Sulam that is standing, is gematria Merkava. Hashem showed Yaakov Maisa Merkava, and everything is set up in Shemayim. And the Baal HaTurim also says that Sulam is gematria Mammon, money. Now this is interesting. Sulam seems to represent the highest of high. Now the other end of the ladder, the lowest of low. It's the gematria Kisi HaKavod, it's the gematria the Koil HaTfilah, Mashiach, Maimin HaSinai. And on the other hand, it could also be the gematria Avodah Zarah. And what's in the middle of all this? Money. And that's precisely the point. Money definitely has an effect on a person. What type of effect? Well, that depends how his attitude to money is. Malach Elikim, tzaddikim who live with a vision of trying to help others, of promoting Torah and mitzvahs for them, money is the greatest bracha in the world. In lieu of their tzedakah, in lieu of the menuchas hanefesh, of the tranquility, that enough money gives them so they can devote themselves to Torah and mitzvahs. For them, money spells Kisei HaKavod. For them, money spells Mashiach. Money spells Har Sinai. On the other hand, money can be the source of Rachmana litzlan, the greatest Yerida of this world. Like Shlomo says in Koheles, Oisher Shomer L'Balav L'Rasai. Thus the Baal Shem HaKadosh explained. The money is basically only meaningful down here in this world. Even one split second afterwards, money is insignificant. But the Roisha Megia Shemayim, using money right down here in this world, can lead you to the highest Midragis. The Malachei Elikim are oil in the Yarden boy, so be careful. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos that there is a Metzudah Prusa al Kol HaChaim. There is a net that is spread that potentially can take in every living thing. The Talmud Yaakov Yosef, quoting the Sefer Akana, explains as follows. If you want to trap a bird, you put bird seed in a net. If you want to trap a deer, you put deer food in a trap. And these animals walk into the trap and they're caught. There are even animals that know that they're walking into a trap, but they can't help themselves. They see the food. Well, human beings are the same way. We need parnasa. But the Yetzer Hara puts our parnasa into all sorts of traps and nets. And if we are not careful, we wind up wasting our life in pursuit of the extra dollar. And as Rachmana litzlan we see so often the case is, the Yid that is so pious in the Besmedrash drops his guard when it comes to Choshen Mishpat and he has to engage in business. This Yid fell into the trap. The one who is so engrossed in his mode of income that Torah and his Avodah lies in some distant, remote corner, that Yid fell into the trap. Aval, but concludes the Sefer Akana, HaChacham asher einav b'roshai tzarech lilchaim im Yitzra, he has to battle with Yetzer Hara, not to get caught in a net in pursuit of his parnasa. Yaakov Avinu was traveling and suddenly, vayivka b'makom, he encounters the place as if unexpected. Vayolin sham, and he sleeps over there, kiva hashemesh, because the sun set. So Rashi brings in the second shot that the lashon of vayivka is a lashon of tefillah, a lashon of prayer. Like the pasuk says, v'al tivga bi. And don't beg me about this. Don't ask me about this. So you see, tivga represents an immense passion in the form of prayer. This teaches us, vayivka b'makom, that Yaakov Avinu engaged over here in the koyach ha-tefillah. Not only that, he opened up a whole new channel of prayer for Klal Yisrael. Vilimdanu, this teaches us, shetikein tefillas arvis, that Yaakov Avinu instituted the evening prayer Mariv. So why doesn't the pasuk say vayispalel, that he simply davened? Why does it say vayivka? Lilamecha. It's also to teach you shekavtzu lo ha'aretz. The earth shrank. In other words, the distance miraculously became less for him. He was walking, and all of a sudden there he was in the Makom HaMikdash. So apparently it's two separate things over here. Vayivka teaches us that Yaakov Avinu elected that this would be an appropriate time to institute Tfilas Mariv for Klal Yisrael, and in addition to that, something else happened over here. There's a whole different message in the word Vayivka, and that is to tell us there was Kritzas Haderech, and he was traveling, and suddenly there he was on the Makom HaMikdash. They appear to be two different taichin of the pasuk that are independent of each other. Dr. Sfasemis, no, that's not what Rashi means. These two pshatim are one pshat. There's a flow over here. It's all connected. And again, let me go back to a story which was mentioned several times. There was a Yid who once said, at home I was an Alexander Chassid. My whole family, basically my whole town, used to travel to the Alexander Rebbe for Yantiv. And he said, I want to be very candid with you. I went, because everybody went. I came to the Tish because everyone came to the Tish. I listened to the Zmirais. I took the Shirayim from the Rebbe. I stood there because that was the thing to do. It was the in thing. It was the style. But I must tell you the truth, I wasn't really part of it. I went. It was like a social gathering. I was vayeitzei my chayv. I showed my face. I stepped outside. I spent a good deal of the tish and the davening in the polish in the hallway, catching up on the politics. I went to Alexander, but I wasn't really in Alexander. As the dark clouds hovered over Europe, and I started the most difficult trail of my life, which ended in Auschwitz, which he survived. I can tell you that Friday night, after a difficult day of back-breaking labor, where my life hung like from a thread, and I slept in a 5-tied bunk bed, wood, in the freezing winter night, I managed to close my eyes and completely remove myself from my immediate surroundings, lift myself above the flames, and I imagined that I was in Alexander. And I closed my eyes and I saw the Rebbe, and I heard this miras. I want to tell you something. When I was in Alexander, I wasn't in Alexander. When I was in Auschwitz, then I was in Alexander. There is an Inyan that Sfas Emes explains that according to the will of a person, it depends how much a person really wants. You can generate Kedushas Hashem Yisbarach. In other words, to perceive the Kedushas Hashem Yisbarach b'chol makom, regardless of where you are. And that's what Rashi means when Rashi says, Nekar Har Moriah, that the Har Moriah was uprooted, he bought a can and it came over here. The Pasuk is teaching us something. The Pasuk is teaching us, explains the Sfas Emes, that Yaakov Avinu had such a tremendous rutzing to come to the Har HaMoriah, to be in the Beis HaMikdash, to feel the Hashras HaShechina, that even though in reality he was very far, but the Har HaMoriah jumped toward him. And that is a concept that Yaakov Avinu instituted, which applies to every one of us. If you really, really want, then you're there, regardless of where you really are. The Mishnah says in Masechtas Brachos that if someone is riding on a donkey and for whatever reason he can't get off, so he should close his eyes during davening and imagine that he's in the Kadshe Kadashim, that he's in the Holy of Holies. Satmar Rav Chaim Levracha said, you know what this Mishnah is teaching us? That a person can be in the Holy of Holies in the Beis HaMikdash and he can be thinking about donkeys. So he's on a donkey. And a person can be on a donkey and think about the Beis HaMikdash, so he's in the Beis HaMikdash. It depends where you're headed for, what your rotzain is. I'll share with you a machshava sitting on a plane that takes off from LaGuardia Airport in New York to Chicago, and we're still over New York. And you already hear the pilot saying that I'm checking with the control tower in Chicago whether he can get direct routing or not. Planes have like a pathway in the sky, which isn't necessarily the shortest way, but it's the safest way. Sometimes if they're late, they can request a more direct route. So I said to myself, you're still over LaGuardia Airport, you still see the control tower over here. What are you talking to Chicago for? The teretz is, if you're headed for Chicago, they're the ones you have to deal with, not where you are now. Where your chukah is, where you're approaching is much more part of your life than where you're physically situated. And this is true for life in general. It's not so important where you are right now. What's important is, where do you want to head? That is what controls your life. That is what has to influence your decisions. And that ultimately creates the environment in your heart, which is much more important and much more real than the physical environment that happens to be around you. The Mishnah says in Masechtas Sukkah that the lechem upon him each Shabbos was divided between two shifts of kohanim, the mishmar vayeitzei and the mishmar hanichnas. The incoming shift, according to the first opinion of the Mishnah, received 6 chalos. That was the shift that was going to serve in the Beis HaMikdash the next week. And the outgoing shift that served the previous week also received 6 chalos, because the 12 chalos were distributed on Shabbos after they brought in the new 12 chalos. And there's a dissenting opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says no, the incoming shift gets 7 chalos and the outgoing shift gets 5. And the Gemara asks for kasha. Why does Rabbi Yehuda allot more to the incoming shift than the outgoing shift? So technically, because they're going to be doing much more work, they're going to have to close the gates of the Azara. In fact, the Gemara, what did they accomplish? So next week when they leave, they're going to get one less. What's the difference if they get 6 now and 6 next week, or they get 7 now and 5 next week? Ultimately, they're going to walk away with the same amount. And the answer is perhaps what the Sfasemis is suggesting over here. There's a big difference between a shift of Kehanim that knows they are headed into the Beis HaMikdash to do the Avodah for the week, as opposed to a shift of Kehanim that physically is still in the Beis HaMikdash but knows that their shift is over, that they're headed back out to the world. The shift that in Machshava knows they're headed in has a greater Kedusha than these very same people at the end of their term when they know they're leaving. Therefore they take in 7, and when they go out they take only 5. Famous kasha the Baal Shem Tov asks, why is it after a whole day of eating on Erev Yom Kippur, and especially the Sudas HaMasekes, where we eat and eat to our fill and we drink 7 cups of water just to make sure we shouldn't be hungry, and we're so full we can hardly move, and we come to Shul, Kol Nidrei night, it comes to Marav, we scream loud, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Eliyah. Why? Because we're like malachim, we're like angels, and angels scream Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus loud. Ironically, about 25 hours later, Motzei Yom Kippur, we're davening Ma'ariv Motzei Yom Kippur after an entire day of not eating, after an entire day of being dressed in white, without shoes, standing in prayer. We're davening Ma'ariv Motzei Yom Kippur, and we say Baruch Shem quietly. We're no longer angels. We're no longer malachim. It should be just the opposite. Dr. Baal Shem Tov, no. Because where a person's machshava is, that's where he is. True, you spent a whole day Erev Yom Kippur eating. You're supposed to. It's a mitzvah to eat, and you're full. But you come to Shul Yom Kippur night knowing there's a whole day of Yom Kippur ahead of you, a special day, above and beyond this world. So with a full stomach, you're a malach. You scream Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusai. When it gets to Motzei Yom Kippur and you're davening Ma'ariv, you're already thinking about that piece of sponge cake that they're bringing down. You're no longer a malach. Zok the Sfasemis, that's the connection over here to Yaakov Avinu being Mesakein Tfilas Arvis, to him instituting Ma'ariv. Ma'ariv is the tefillah of night. During the time of darkness, it's difficult to see the light. During difficult periods, it's hard to be able to maintain the proper level of emunah and bitachon. However, if a person really has a will to do so, so he doesn't live in the difficult period, he may be situated in the difficult period, but his mindset, his heart deals with the arriving control tower, not where he is now. In the darkest times of life, if a person has the proper ratzon, he can be zaycha, even if he's not at the madrega. He can have kvitzas haderech, shaloya pi derech hateva, to the mokim and migdash, to a shoas hashchina, to a place of light. It all depends on the ratzon adam, how much a person really wants. That is what Tfilas Arvis represents. That's the Ma'ariv Tfilah, the Emunascha B'Leilos. The pasuk says Shalom, Lakare for the close, U'Lerachik and for the distant. There is no davar rabid as Yaitzei mi Hashem Yisbarach. Even if a person is, in his life finds himself far, in terms of physically being located far, in terms of his own emotions, he feels far. But remember, there's a certain advantage to that, says the Sfasemis. Sometimes when a person is far, there is a chuk in his heart. There is a will to come back in. And that will can be more emes, can be more stronger than being in. Through ratzon, a person can generate even b'mokim harachat, the Ya'ar of Hashem Yisbarach. There is a p'china of shalom l'karev, and there is a p'china of shalom l'rachak. And that's what Rashi is telling us over here. When a yid feels far, he can daven Ma'ariv, and suddenly he too can be zeicha to kvitzas haderech. And he himself, that is any yid, should not underestimate how close he can come to the Rebbeinu Shalom just by wanting to be there. When Yaakov Avinu woke up after the dream, he experienced fear. Fear in a positive sense. Yirah Shamayim, fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A new level of fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because he was able to be privy to higher madregas of Ashras HaShechina. So along with it came a greater madrega of Yirah Shamayim. It's important to understand, points out the Sfasemis, that here lies the greatness of Yaakov Avinu. For most people, they went to sleep and suddenly had a dream, and they saw angels going up a ladder, going down a ladder, all to protect him. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself to them and would show them all future generations. And they would be privy for the heavenly realms to open up before them. So most people would wake up, wash Negel Wasser and say, I was Zeicha to Nevuah. I was elevated. And then you would meet your spouse perhaps, who would say, it's late, we have to get the children to the bus and don't forget to pick up apples today. And your feeling would be, do you know what I was just privy to? The Divine Shem is opening up the heavenly realms. And you're sending me on mundane errands? You just slept. I had a nevuah. Well, we may not say that, but we probably would think it. And throughout the entire day, we would wonder, what did we do to be zecher to this great madreg of nevuah? How is this going to change my life now? Should I insist that I sit at the Mizrach wall? Should I tell anybody? Are they going to believe me? Should I get a fur collar? I mean, I'm a different person now. Yaakov Avinu woke up. And what was his first reaction? Fear. Yiras Shamayim. Yaakov Avinu just went to sleep. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed to him the entire future of Klal Yisrael, the destiny of his people. He was told that he's on the Mokem HaMikdash, the promise of Eretz Yisrael. He saw heavenly angels. And what was Yaakov Avinu's reaction to this? Yiras Shamayim, a sense of fear, a sense of, I was just given a mission. I was just given a tremendous responsibility. Am I going to live up to this? HaKadosh Baruch Hu trusted me. Now what am I going to do about this? That was his concern. The idea that he was privy to all of these secrets, to all of these worlds being revealed to him, that didn't even come into consideration. That wasn't even a thought over here. It was just a sense of Yiras Shamayim. And here's where the p'china of Yaakov Ish Emes, being a person of total truth, would shine through. And through this fear, his children were Zeicha to the Beis HaMikdash. Yaakov Avinu's initial response after feeling this level of fear of Yiras Shamayim was, Ein Zaki and Beis Elokim. And this is important, because the Sfas Emes explains that in his vision, he saw the building of the Beis HaMikdash and he saw the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Yaakov Avinu understood that the kiyum of the Beis HaMikdash, for the Beis HaMikdash to be sustained, there has to be a level of Yiras Shamayim within Klal Yisrael. That has to be sustained as well. And the two things are basically connected to each other. The Beis HaMikdash is a manifestation of the yira, of the chukah that Klal Yisrael has to become close to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And if one subsides, the other goes with it. Vayira Yaakov feared. Vayomer, he said, Manoira Mokem Ein Zaki and Beis Elokim. But the success of this Beis Elokim as an entity down here on this world, for it to remain down here in this world, depends on the level of Yiras Shamayim that I can transmit to my children, and that they can transmit to their children. And that's why Yaakov was so concerned. But by the same token, when a Yid feels that Yiras Shamayim and that sense of commitment, that sense of not just to waste away his hour, his minute, his day, his opportunity at a relationship with anyone to make that person a better person, to make himself a better person, when a Yid feels of this kind of a Yira, so the Pasuk says, the Zeh Sha'ar Shamayim, then regardless of where he is, he opens up a gateway in heaven. There's a new channel, there's a new line of communication that even you or I can be privy to. And finally, one more Nakuda. The Medrash Tanchuma says that Yaakov Avinu had to run away and remain through those difficult years in the house of Lava in the form of a kind of galus. Now, who has to go into galus? The halacha is one who killed someone else b'shagig by mistake has to go into galus. He has to run to the Ari Miklat. The Medrash Tanchuma says that because Esav would be lost now as a result of his anger at Yaakov Avinu, Esav felt he was manipulated. So in a sense, Yaakov Avinu had driven away Esav. And that was a kind of killing him b'shogeg, because he should have been makaris him. That's why Yaakov had to go into Galus. That's what the Medrash says. But the Sfas Emes puts this into perspective. Even though it says mitzvah sheker tirchak, but Yaakov was ish emes, pure emes, and he could have had the koyach to be makaris everything to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, including Esav. Yaakov's mistake was, and that's what the Medrash says, it was a shogeg. Yaakov thought, and here the Darga of Anava had overstepped its bounds a little bit. There was too much modesty. How can I have an effect of such an overwhelming source of tumah like Esav? How can I possibly change his direction or draw him close? Had Yaakov believed he could be Makarev Esav, he would have. It was a shaygeg to think that he couldn't, and that's why he didn't. But if someone has lost the shaygeg, one also has to pay the price. The lesson to us is never to assume that we can't be Makarev anyone. There are various different minhagim as to when the proper time is to move into a new home. Some people have a minig to put in some salt or challah on Erev Shabbos, and others have a minig to move on Tuesday. Some people like to make chasnas on Tuesdays. Why is Tuesday a special day? Why is Tuesday a good day to begin things? Because the term kitov appears not once but twice as far as the third day of creation is concerned. Twice on Tuesday does the pasuk say v'yar lekim kitov, whereas on Monday the term kitov does not even appear once. Why? So there are a whole host of different reasons. Amongst them, on the second day of creation there was division. On the second day the pasuk says v'mavdil b'mayim l'mayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu separated between the upper waters and the lower water. And as a result, when there is division, when there is pain, there is no tzai. The Shechina leaves when there is machlokes. Many Mefarshim ask, but on the first day of creation, on Yom Echad, we do have kitov. And over there you also have division. As a matter of fact, in regard to the first day of creation, the term kitov seems to be directly linked to the separation. There the pasuk says, "Vayar lekim es ar kitov," and "Vayavdel lekim bein ar vein ha'choshech." So it seems that the epitome of tov, which is the ar haganis mirumis in the word tov, only came about because Vayavdel lekim, because Hashem separated bein ar vein ha'choshech. So we seem to have a contradiction over here. On the first day of creation, it is the separation that instituted the tov. Yet on the second day of creation, it is the separation of the waters that voids it of the term tov. But the answer the Mefarshim say is simple. Separation is either tov or exactly the opposite of such. It depends what you're separating. When you are distinguishing between light and darkness, that is the epitome of tov. However, when you are distinguishing within the waters itself, water that was one entity, and you now separated the waters, that is the lack of tov. If the separation is between a tzaddik and a rasha, so just the opposite. We find Kozman Lot was together with Avram Avinu. You didn't have as much Hashras Hashchina. You didn't have the Madreg of Nevuah. Once Lot separated himself, there was a manifestation of tov, not the opposite. When there is strife and machlokes between tzaddikim, between good people, when it's not an issue of separating light from dark, but it's an issue of separating you from me, that represents the opposite of tov. So one brings tov even if you didn't have it, and the other sends the tov away even if technically you were worthy of it. Yaakov Avinu says to Lavan, "Matishi u'machatasi." What is my terrible sin, kidolakta achrai, that you have pursued after me? Now the end is that Lavan approached Yaakov making himself the biggest tzaddik. Lavan's lines were, Lavan, why did you have to hide yourself? Why did you have to run away clandestinely? Try to outwit me? Why didn't you tell me? I would have sent you away with songs, b'simcha, b'shirim, b'saifel, b'kina, with all sorts of musical instruments. And how can you do this to a poor father, an old merciful father who wanted to kiss his sons and his daughters and say goodbye to them? So suddenly Lavan comes blazing after Yaakov Avinu, ki dalakta, lashon of a deleka, and he says to him, "Why did you run away from me? We're such good friends. I'm your father-in-law. We're family. Why did you rob me of the basic need to show care and emotion and express my feelings?" And Yaakov Avinu said, wait. Suddenly you want to be my friend? Suddenly you're expressing this concern? Suddenly you're expressing this anger that we aren't treating each other properly as family? I must have done something wrong. If you love an Harami, the symbol of treachery and evil,
if you suddenly have this tremendous will that we should be family in the way that families are close to each other, then I must have done something wrong. So that you're blazing after me. If I'm attracting this kind of a devotion from a person like you that represents everything that is opposite of truth and faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then I feel that I have to do some soul searching. No. How often have I heard the term, there's nothing wrong with my child. So-and-so ruined my child. So-and-so exposed my child to terrible things. Now, in essence, that may be true. And of course, the so-and-so also says, there was never anything wrong with me. I used to be very good until I met that friend. So one always has to ask, if no one is inherently bad, and someone only goes down because of an encounter with the wrong friend, who was the first bad person? If that wrong friend also had a wrong friend that schlepped him down. Elamai, at least to a certain degree, there has to be an immune system within the person that naturally has been built up to repel hearing the wrong thing, seeing the wrong things, associating with the wrong thing. And as much as no one is immune to the wrong environment, and it affects everybody more or less, but Lamaisa, if someone feels that so-and-so is schlepping him down, so besides for obviously separating yourself from so-and-so, one has to ask, what did I do wrong to start with that somehow I was aligned to this problem? How come so-and-so didn't have an effect on A, B, only on C? And if I'm the C, then I have to ask that this blazing problem ran after me. Where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong so that I was more vulnerable than someone else? Now the pasuk says, "Yikras Shem Amakenahu Beiskel." The Ulam Bad Luz was Shem Ha'ir L'Rishayim. Chazal tell us the city we are referring to over here is Yerushalayim Yerakaidish. Schacter Sam Sefer, Luz used to be the name of Yerushalayim. Where do we find Yerushalayim referred to as Luz? Or, for that matter, where do we find any pasuk throughout Tanakh referring to a city of Luz anywhere in Eretz Yisrael? Zakter Sam Sefer, the Gemara dashes the pasuk L'chu v'nala beis Elokei Yaakov. Loika Avram shekaru har. The ultimate redemption of Yerushalayim does not refer to the status that Avram Avinu was able to bring it up to that of the mountain, V'loiki Yitzchak shekaru sada, and not even to the Madrega of Yitzchak who referred to it as a field, Elokei Yaakov shekaru bais. What we're hoping for is that of Yaakov, who refers to it as a bais. A bais is a permanent home. When a person says my home, my house, there's a lot of emotion there, a lot of affection there. It's more than just bricks and stones and pipes. Your home is your base of security. Your home is your bed of confidence. It's what you work for, what you live for, to be able to get home and be home and enjoy home. Now, of course, it was a gradual thing. Avram had prepared it to a certain madrega. Yitzchak had picked it up from there. But the completion, the full bracha of Yerushalayim, the ultimate third Beis HaMikdash that lasts forever, comes in the form of our home, Bayis. And this period that Yaakov Avinu was mispalel for, the time that Yerushalayim is called Bayis, refers to an era li'asid lavai, when all the nations of the world will come running to Yerushalayim, not in a belligerent way, but in an appreciative way. Ki beisi beis tefillah yikari l'chol ha'amin. Now, this means that li'asid lavai, says the Chassam Sofer, there will be a time when Yerushalayim will, to a certain degree, be an international city. Not in the context of how the suggestion is used today to take it away from Yidden, chas v'shalom, but adarabah, in the form of Klal Yisrael's understanding of Yerushalayim and Amunah and Hashras Hashchina. This will be the compass for the entire world. Everyone will run here to find Amunah, to find B'tachon, to find understanding, and to find themselves. So again, if we weren't ready to call Yerushalayim our bias, if we weren't solid enough in our own Amunah, then the internationalization of Yerushalayim is a klala. But Yaakov was mispal that we should be ready for it. That our level of tahara and amunah should be so strong that we can open up the floodgates and say you can all come, because the only thing that's going to happen is, world, you are going to learn from us. We will repel any possible negative influences that you would be looking to impart on us. There's a pasuk in Shir El Ginas Egas Yuravati. I have gone down into the field of nuts. Klal Yisrael in Golus is compared to a nut. A nut has all sorts of different shells. The Chazal understand it. There are 4 separate parts to most nuts. And there's a klipa, there's a shell that separates one part and another. In Golus, Klal Yisrael has been spread to the 4 corners of the world. And the Emes Ha'olam stand between us. They are stumbling blocks to our emunah, to the chibur of Klal Yisrael. A luz is actually a kind of a nut. As a matter of fact, a luz is the smallest kind of nut, explains the Chassam Sofer. It's so tender, so soft, that unlike other nuts, which have hard shells, the luz is like a meichel. There's no hefed of a klipa between one chelik and the other. There are no shells in the luz nut that separates one part of the nut to the other. And what happened over here, says the Chassam Sofer, is as follows. Yaakov Avinu heard the bracha. Rasta Yom of the Kedman, you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east, to the sign of the Negba, and to the north and to the south. The Nivruchu v'chol kol mishpachesu adama v'zarecha. Yaakov Avinu woke up. He knew that he was lying on the Makom HaMikdash. He knew that eventually all of the nations of the world are going to come streaming to the Makom HaMikdash. Yaakov Avinu saw everything. He saw that the Makom HaMikdash will be the most sensitive place in the world, that it will touch the chord. It will draw the focus of all the nations of the world. It will inflame the passions of the world, and eventually the entire world will come and want to learn from the Makom HaMikdash. They will understand why this place would always be so sensitive. They would feel the Yeshua Shechina. They're going to want to follow the path of Klal Yisrael. And Yaakov Avinu saw all of this. He saw the whole path of Golus and the Tikkun Li'asid Lavai. But he had one concern. When that time comes, that the nations of the world will stream to the Beis HaMikdash, not to protest, not to argue, but to learn, is Klal Yisrael still going to be vulnerable? Are they going to be solid enough in their base so that they can repel any possible negative influence? Therefore, the pasuk says as follows: Yaakov Avinu woke up, and he referred to the place as Beiskel. He knew eventually this is going to be Beiskel. Through this place, the entire world is going to see there is a Rabbeinu Shalom on the world. But Rabbeinu Shalom, I beg of you one thing: that Luz, Shein Ha'ir L'Hashoina, before that day comes, the city should be called Luz. Luz, a reference to the Luz nut. Unlike the other Egais that Shlomo Melech refers to in Golus, El Ginais Egas Yiradati, that has the strong klipas, the thick shells that separate us from our Amunah. Yaakov Avinu said, before that time comes that the nations of the world are going to fly to the Beis HaMikdash, let Klal Yisrael be at the Medrega of this Luz nut. No klipas, no mechitzais, no hefsekais, in every Jewish heart, pure, clean Amunah in the Rabbeinu Shalom. And once Klal Yisrael builds that kind of a house for themselves, I am no longer concerned with the nations. They will only learn, and they won't impart any of their negative influences on Klal Yisrael. And of course, the longer they're going to be there, there won't be any negative influences to give over anyway. But in the interim, Klal Yisrael will be protected. They will already be shielded. So I beg of you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's wonderful. It's the most beautiful news in the world. The Ulam Bat, Luz Shein Ha'ir L'Hashoina. Let Klal Yisrael first be that Luz that has no hefsekais between them and you. We know when Yaakov Avinu was here, he was misakein tefillas arvis. He made marv. Now, how come Yaakov Avinu waited for now to enact tefillas arvis? What about all the years that he was sitting and learning? Didn't it occur to him then that marv would be a good thing for Klal Yisrael? I mean, during all of Yaakov Avinu's years until now, he was mamish in the Kodesh Kedashim of the world. 63 years in the house of his father, Yitzchak Avinu. 14 years he learned Torah in the house of Aver. And that would have been a very appropriate time during any one of those years to be Masakin Tzilas Arvis, I mean, that's when he would have the Yishuv Hadas. Why did he wait until he was en route to Choron, endangered by Chayis the Listim, feeling so frightened, feeling so concerned? Dr. Nesiva Shalom, Yaakov Avinu, until he left Beersheva, was Ish Tam Yeshiv V'Holam. Until now, he was Isaac only in Torah and Navaida. He really lived in a different world. He had no real shaykhs to Inyanim of Olam Hazeh. Vayishka b'makim. Mahu Chazal tell us this is the first time in 14 years he even went to sleep. And now suddenly he was thrust into this world. He had to get married. He had to set up a family, provide for a family. He had to deal with Lavan. He knew what was coming. Vayivga b'makim. It hit him very, very hard. Vayivga b'makim, literally he bumped into the place. Meaning, when he was sort of thrown out of his medrash, so to speak, because of the mission that lay ahead of him, the world hit him like a wall. Like a wall of bricks in front of him. Vayivga b'makim. He said, this is the world, give out. And that's why he picked that time. That was the appropriate time to be Masakin Tzilas Arvis. Tzilas Arvis, explains the Nesiva Shalom, is the tefillah for nighttime, the tefillah for darkness, the tefillah of Kivah HaShemesh, when a person is sort of banging away in the darkness, waiting for direction. Yaakov said, okay, I know the world that I was living in until now, but I now know that it's my achrayus to prepare a mokum of tefillah even in this world enveloped by an inability to really focus on how do I get out of here? Where is the right way? I must pave the way for a Yid to be able to pour his heart out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu even on the other side of this brick wall. Because when he was in Beis Yitzchak or in the Yeshiva of Shem V'Ever, he could have not been masaking this tefillah. He could have never understood how difficult Golus can be and how vulnerable a Yid can be, free-falling in Golus, in a situation where there doesn't seem to be any light at the end of the tunnel, where solutions seem to be completely evading us. Now that Yaakov experienced it, Yaakov was masaking Tzilas Arvis. Yaakov said, I was taught how to put a ladder down here into this darkness and climb out of it, and I'm going to pave the way for my children to do as well. So Vayivka b'makom, originally it hit him very hard. He bumped into the place. What a wall, what a makom, what a world. However, afterwards, he said, after he was taught the lesson of the ladder, that you can turn this around to Avodas Hashem Yisbarach as well, that the Nisyanis can become the very footstools, the very stepping stones for becoming close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Vayeitzei said, Ochin yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh. In this makom that hit me so hard, this vayivka b'makom that I thought was just a brick wall, I see that if you know how to approach this, if you know how to deal with your Nisyanis, you can find Hashem in this very place. This is something that I did not know until now. Because until now, I really wasn't in this world. I was more in Olam Haba. And after the Parsha B'dafka begins by repeating vayeitzei Yaakov mi Beersheva vayelech Haran. Even though we already learned in the previous Parsha vayishma Yaakov elav v'lima vayelech padena Aram. Because the Pasuk wants to point out the contrast over here. And how Yaakov paved the way for us to deal with this darkness until we are solid enough to teach it to the world.
There are several ways to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of being Maver Sedra. You can either say each pasuk twice and then the targum, or you can say a whole parsha. A whole parsha means until a pei or a samach in the chumash, and then repeat the psukim until the pei and samach, and then the targum. Try to do that with Parshas Vayeitzei, and you will realize that you won't find any pei or samach. If your custom of being Maver Sedra is to begin and go until the first pei or samach, then you'll begin Parshas Vayeitzei, and you will go until the first peis, and those are at the very end of the parsha. For 148 psukim, you will find no pei or samach, no break in the parsha. And don't say, well, Parshas Vayeitzei begins Kapitel Chav Ches, and it ends Kapitel Lamed Beis or into Kapitel Lamed Beis. These numbers are not from Moshe Rabbeinu. Now this may come as somewhat of a shock to some of us, but it's an historical fact. These numbers, Kapitel Aleph, Kapitel Beis, Kapitel Gimel, throughout Tanakh, it's understood that it was actually made by Galachim.
The breakup of the parashiyos in terms of these numbers, they don't represent a Messiah, a tradition. You're never going to hear someone dashing a gematria, well, in Kapitel Lamed Beis Pasuk Aleph it says Yashkim Lavam B'Baiker, so that has to do with Lamed Beis, with Leiv, with heart. You'll never hear anything like that. There's no Messiah here. There's no substance to this in terms of dashing Torah. As a matter of fact, in many instances, these numbers run contrary to the Messiah. Chazal are makbid to end the parasha dafka with a davar toiv, to begin with a davar toiv. You don't even have a new number at the beginning of a Seder, like Parshas Vayeitzei begins Kapitel Chav Ches Pasuk Yud. It's just an organizational thing. It's the way they decided it was a good way to find a pasuk or to identify a pasuk. Now, you may ask, how come it's an hour Chamoshim? That's a good question. And I guess there's something to say about the fact that Seif Kol Klal Yisrael uses these numbers throughout the year. And that alone gives it some measure of significance. L'maisa, I don't know of a Chumash or a Tanakh that was ever printed that doesn't use these numbers. I heard once from Shlomo Rottenberg, a great historian who wrote the Sefer told us and he discussed this with Rabbi Yaakov. When he would quote a pasuk in the Sefer, he asked whether or not he can point out these numbers in order to identify a pasuk. Can he say, if he wants to refer to the vayeitzei Yaakov mi Beersheba, that it's a Kapitel Chav Ches Pasuk Yud? So Rabbi Yaakov told him, if you see Klal Yisrael is doing it, so don't try to be smarter. But on the other hand, we ought to know that Adirab, we look at these numbers and we say, we don't run with these numbers. We may use it in a practical sense, but it doesn't really represent to us the separation between one parasha and another. What is the real separation between one parasha and the other? Well, you have between one Sedra and another Sedra. And then you have the parashiyos that Moshe Rabbeinu gave us, the Messiah that Moshe Rabbeinu gave us in Har Sinai, and that is when you find either a Pei or a Samach. Which again makes Parashas Vayeitzei very strange, because there is no Pei or Samach throughout the entire parasha. Why is this so? Zok the Balatur and the Balaitaisus say the same thing. It's because Yaakov ran away without anyone knowing. He had to hide from Esav when he ran away, then he had to hide from Lavan when he ran away. So the whole parasha is like an undercover parasha. It's a covert operation. You can't officially mark it, hey, new parasha, and now Yaakov is running away. Can't say that. We have to keep it secret. Toward the end of Parashat Toldos, Yaakov is instructed by his parents to leave. His father tells him to go find a wife, but his mother tells him Esav is trying to kill you, and Yaakov has to sneak away. And the same when he has to leave Lavan. So there are no announcements, and there are no official signs in the paper, come and let us walk Yaakov to the edge of the city. That's why there's no Pei or Samach. What was the purpose, or in general, what is the purpose of a Pei or a Samach? Why do we break things up? And the answer is, because that's the way to teach. Rashi tells us, at the beginning of Parashas Vayikra, Rashi quotes the Chazal. The reason HaKadosh Baruch Hu taught Moshe Rabbeinu the Torah a little bit, stop, is Litein Revach Lehizbainain Bein Parsha LeParsha. There is no greater guarantee of a class looking dumbfounded and not understanding one word that you're saying. There's no better way to ensure that than to give them too much information without a chance of stopping in the middle. In terms of instructing and teaching, there's a rule. The more you talk in one time, the less the people will understand. And we see that in Chazal very often, that the trick to teaching is Lashon Kitzar. Short, concise, stop, give the Talmud a chance to think. And Rashi even stresses, if this were true for Moshe Rabbeinu learning from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how much more so is it true Kal V'chomer L'Hedyet Haloi Meit Min HaHedyet, from an ordinary Talmud learning from an ordinary Rebbe? How important it is for the Rebbe to stop every once in a while and give the student a chance to absorb and think through what he was just taught. That is officially the purpose for the Pei and the Samach. Don't just fly through the whole Sedra in one shot. Stop. Think. So how does that relate to the idea that there is no Peir Samach in Parshas vayeitzei. That in Yaakov Avinu's most trying moments, his most fearful moments, there's no time to think. What does that mean? We seem to be getting a message over here that normally the concept of to give someone space, being partial or partial is boinain, is positive, is necessary. Except when it comes to having to go through difficult periods, we say, no, don't stop, don't think, keep running. How do we apply this? How do we make sense of this? Dr. Chaim Shmulevitz, and this is found in the Sefer Kovetz Sichos, Tafshin Lamed Beis. The trick to getting through difficult times is to stop analyzing each chapter on its own. Because during trying moments, and when a person feels vulnerable and frightened, if you stop and take each new bulletin and each piece of information on its own, and you begin to judge it for what it is, and what it is doesn't sound too good and doesn't sound too promising, then you're going to lose it. The trick to getting through difficult periods, explains Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, is I don't understand this, and I don't understand that, and I may not understand the news headlines for the next 5 days, or the next 5 weeks, or the next 5 months. But when it's all over, in the final analysis, at the end of the day, whether it's the end of the year, whether it's the end of the tkufa, whether it's the end of the era, or whether it's the end of a person's duration down here in this world, when you will look at the whole story from beginning to end, then you will understand. The famous Mashal of Elchanan Wasserman said during his most difficult moments, when they asked him why, how do we sort this all out? And he said to them, don't sort it all out, just work on your emunah. Someone who knows nothing about farming will say, look at this farmer. He's coming out with this monstrous looking machine and he's digging up the whole earth and turning it over. And he's claiming that he's planting food he's destroying. And so on and so on. If you wait until you watch the whole process from beginning to end, then you see this is also the process of planting. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz is a Mordechai Yisrael. He says this is the ultimate taich to the words Gam Zulatoiv. And I must quote his words. Gam Zulatoiv means she'enoi don es haprat ufi mashahu. You don't take a specific event and judge it. Rather you say, Gamzu, even this event, which seems like an utter act of destruction. Look at that plowing machine and all those huge hooks and shovels and menacing-looking spikes that are going into the earth. And you look at it and you say, this act on its own, it looks diabolical, it looks so mean, it looks monstrous. But you will see, at the end of the story, it will be l'toiv. And that, he says, was also Rabbi Akiva's lesson when he said, Kol Diyav Dachman L'Tavav, Rabbi Akiva came to a certain town. They did not allow him in. Seemed ruthless on their part. Why is the Kadosh Baruch Hu doing this to him? It's not what Rabbi Akiva asked, but that's what an outside observer would ask. So he had to stay outside of the town limits, and all he had was his rooster, his donkey, his candle, and we know what happened. The wind extinguished the fire, he could not learn. A cat came along and ate up his rooster. And then a lion came and took care of his donkey. And Rabbi Akiva's response was called the Avad Achman L'Tavavid, and at night a huge army came converging on the city, taking everyone prisoner. And Rabbi Akiva realized, had he been there, had they given him refuge, he would have been part of those prisoners. Had they seen the candle, had the cat or the donkey made noise, they would have caught him on the outside, and he would have been imprisoned. And therefore, called the Avad Achman L'Tavavid. What was Rabbi Akiva saying? And had all of this not materialized in this fashion, suppose Rabbi Akiva just woke up that morning and there were no armies that came in to take this mean town prisoner. Suppose Rabbi Akiva woke up the next morning and all he was someone who slept in the woods and he had no candle and no donkey and no rooster, and he returned home. Rabbi Akiva would not say, Kol Ma'adav Achman L'Tavav Chas V'Shalom. Don't miss the message over here, explains Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. Rabbi Akiva meant to say to his Talmidim, look, we don't know, in the course of our particular travail and difficulties in life, when the parsha is over. Sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we see it in the Olam Emes. But when the Parsha is over, then you look back and see that it all made sense, and it all had to be that way, and it was all the greatest matana of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In my particular story, when I wasn't allowed into the town, and I had this most difficult night, struggling with the winds and cats and lions, the story happened to be over. This Parsha happened to be over in the morning. So Rabbi Akiva, when it comes toward the morning and he hears the terrible shouts of the people being taken away as prisoner, he says, so there's a pay and there's a samach over here. This is the end of the Parsha. And the Meila Komad, the Ovid Achman L'Tava, it can be applied over here because I now can show you how all of these things, this whole string of events that seemed nothing other than Murphy's Law, it turned out just the opposite. It was the best of the best. And let's say I woke up in the morning and I didn't see it. So, okay, so the Parsha's not over yet. So the Meila, I don't know yet why it's the best of the best. But I do know that when the story is over, it'll be seen then. But I take a Kadosh Baruch Hu's word for it. I don't have to see it now. I don't have to rush things up. Let a Kadosh Baruch Hu work on his own timetable. Not that a Kadosh Baruch Hu needs my permission to do so, but let me understand that things are working according to a schedule and a plan. And if I don't understand why things are happening or why things are crumbling around me, it's because it's not the end of the story yet. Now, Parashas Vayeitzei, in a sense, is really the Parsha of Golus, even though many look to that as Parshas Vayishlach, because there you have the direct confrontation with Esav. But it's in Parshas Vayeitzei that Yaakov's peaceful and tranquil life, his life of sitting in the Beis Medrash without anything to worry about, in an environment of Yitzchak Avinu, it's in Parshas Vayeitzei that suddenly everything is turned over on him. And suddenly he becomes, from the son of Yitzchak Avinu, the sweet Yaakov Ishtar Yoshev Aholim, sitting in that wonderful Beis Medrash, suddenly he's a fugitive on the run. And were I to scatter a bunch of pays and samach throughout Parshas Vayeitzei, I would have mountains of kashas, difficulties. Yaakov Avinu listens to his father and mother, and he runs. The pasuk in Mishlei says, one who listens to advice is a chacham, apparently suggesting that Yaakov perhaps didn't feel this way, but he took the advice of his parents and he said, I'm going. Great Mesiras Nefesh. And he goes and he clandestinely hides in a Beis HaMedrash for 14 years, and he immerses himself in Torah, and he doesn't even lay down in a bed for 14 years. And what's his reward for all of this? What does he get for all of this? He's attacked by Eliphaz, his life is spared, but he loses everything. Now he has to deal with Lavan. The Arizal once came to a drasha, the Al Kodesh on Shabbos, Parshas Vayeitzei. The Arizal very rarely laughed, but he was laughing then or smiling then. When they asked the Arizal why, he said to them, if only you would have seen what I saw. The Al HaKadosh was darshaning on the pasuk that says that Lavan fooled Yaakov 100 times. So the Al HaKadosh in his drasha was enumerating the 100 times that Lavan fooled Yaakov. And I saw Lavan standing behind the Alshach, said the Arizal, and he was like nodding his head. Yeah, I almost got him there. I almost got him there. Each time he was sort of nodding in improvement. He was reminiscing about those 100 times. So Yaakov Avinu does not go through an easy series of episodes over here. And after all is said and done, toward the end of Parshas Vayeitzei, he's now leaving Lavan's house. He survived the trip to Lavan. He survived the years by Lavan. And he's coming out with a family. Not just a family, but he's coming out with 12 Shvatim, the future of Klal Yisrael. And he's coming out a wealthy person. But what now? Now again, a threat from Esav. So at this point, Yaakov stops. The end of the Pasha. And he deals with his situation in the terms of, okay, nothing made sense till now. His brother trying to kill him, the running away, the hiding, losing all of his money, going into Lavan's house without a penny to his name, coming out with a beautiful family and all of these riches. He loses Rachel. At this point, as Yaakov Avinu is about to return to Eretz Yisrael, now he can afford the luxury to stop and think and say that in all of these difficulties, challenged by one threat after the other, year after year, at least now I can stop and look back and say, But I have 12 shvatim. 12 shvatim that are going to be Klal Yisrael. So there's more to understand. You have to understand why you have to go through all of this. But that's not Nugeya. At least now I see the results. At least now I see it was all part of a plan. And I couldn't look at each Agmas Nefesh along the way, running from Esav, losing my money, the day-by-day difficulties with love, and I say, why is this happening? All of that would have been a threat to the ultimate result, the 12 shvatim that were set into place. The only way Yaakov Avinu was able to do that was to continue on and say, it's okay, Rebbeinu Shalom. I have time to understand at the end of the story. At the end of Parshas Vayeitzei, there are 3 pages, just like there are at the end of any other sefer. Down here in this world, there are kashas. What liyosid lovai, we will not only understand, we will understand and comprehend and see things in a way that we could have never seen it down here. We will understand it threefold. But we will only be zoicha to the schar if we had the courage to keep on going before we understand. And that's why at the end of the parasha it says, the double camps. What are the double camps? So Rashi, there was a camp of Chutz La'aretz Malachim that accompanied Yaakov Avinu until this point. Now that he was coming into Eretz Yisrael, the Eretz Yisrael Malachim took over. At the end of the parasha, we'll all see we were never alone. That there were heavenly shluchim around us, guiding us the whole time, giving us the chizik to survive. But you're only zeicha to see them if you have the courage to keep going till the end of the parasha.
This shiur is distributed by Kol Hadas, 11 Stei Chemet Street, Yerushalayim. For donations, please call 02-5383-999. Fax 02-538-0267. Postbox 57035.